just going to get right into this. Neither of us predicted that it would be the Oklahoma City Thunder against the Minnesota Timberwolves in the Western Conference Finals. I think we both had it as Thunder against Lakers, if I'm not
That
mistaken.
is correct,
Correct.
yes.
But I'll tell you this, even though I predicted that it would be Thunder against Lakers, I actually wanted it to be this exact matchup of Thunder against Timberwolves. I really did. And I'll tell you why. Because you've got two teams that are really trying to step out of shadows. Think about this. If the Timberwolves not only get out of this series, but go on to win the championship, they become their own team. They don't aren't the replacement of the Minneapolis Lakers anymore, essentially. And if Oklahoma City goes on to win this series and win the championship, then they separate themselves from the Seattle Supersonics and they become their own team. And then you have the matchup of SGA against SGA against Anthony Edwards, where on one side you've got the guy who I believe should be a two-time MVP after this season. And on the other side, you've got the guy who many believe is the next face of the NBA. And then you've got Chet Holmgren going against Julius Randle. You got, this double big lineup on both sides, though I would say both lineups, in terms of those double bigs, do it differently because Gobert is more of a down low, traditional type of big man, old school, if you will. Julius Randle does shoot the 3-pointer, but I would say he's more mid range, if you will. And then on the other side, I would say Isaiah Hartenstein, he's kind of a hybrid. He doesn't shoot the 3-pointer, but he does like that mid range, and he will go down low and bang in the paint. But I wouldn't say that's his natural game. And then Chet Holmgren can step out, shoot that 3-pointer. So it's really a very interesting stylistic matchup. And I'm, like I said, though it's not the matchup I predicted, it's the one I really wanted.
Yeah, I think you're one of only a few people that actually really wanted this matchup just because of market size. I know that's obviously not the matchup the NBA wanted when you're talking about markets of Minnesota and Oklahoma City. I'm not saying it's going to be a good matchup, and I sort of feel the same way about the East that I do about the West is, and we're going to get into this a little bit later when we talk about, is this now going to be the fact that the NBA has 7 different champions in 7 different years? We're having different markets in the conference finals. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? To me, like outside of just SGA versus Ant, there's just not a ton of juice in this series. I think that is the premier matchup, and I think that's what it's going to come down to in this series. I think there is a lot on the line for both of those individuals. For SGA, it's a chance for him, in my opinion, to back up the fact that he will probably win, though it has not been officially announced yet, the MVP award of this year. And for Anthony Edwards, it is, if he gets by Oklahoma City, he will have literally beaten every single star slash superstar in the Western Conference over the last 2 postseasons on his way to a championship. I'm talking about Kevin Durant, Nikola Jokic, this year, LeBron James, Luka Doncic. Steph Curry is the one that it's whatever, but I think Minnesota would have won that series anyway. Jimmy Butler, and now Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. So he would have gone through essentially everybody in his way. And if the Minnesota Timberwolves do win the championship this season, which I think if they do beat Oklahoma City, they will do so. I think more so because of his style of play, he reminds a lot of people of a Kobe Bryant, Dwayne Wade, Michael Jordan. Of course, all of those guys were shooting guards. Anthony Edwards has the same numbers in his career at this point than Kobe Bryant did in year three when it comes to points, rebounds, and assists. If Ant ends up going on and wins Minnesota their first championship, and as you would say, sort of cast them, I would say, more so away than being the Kevin Garnett franchise, and now they've sort of come into their own as Anthony Edwards' team. I think Anthony Edwards, whether he likes it or not, and we do have Nikola Jokic, and we do have Luka, and LeBron and Steph are still in the league, but if Ant wins this championship, whether he likes it or not, he will at least be viewed as the heir apparent as the next great face of the league when LeBron and Steph do hang up the boots, at the very least, if not already.
So we'll get to the Eastern Conference in a minute, but let me just say this. The NBA better hope that New York beats Indiana. Because could you imagine if the NBA Finals is OKC against Indiana or OKC against, Minnesota
against Indiana?
Yeah, think about that. Like, it would be like a rematch almost of Toronto against, or not Toronto, I'm sorry, Milwaukee against Phoenix. That same idea.
Yeah, but at least in that case, Phoenix had always been like a good big brand. Like the Suns have always been a good team. They were just waiting for them to get over the hump. In Indiana's case and Minnesota's case, they have both been dumpster fires for years, and it's only been the last year or two that they've risen to prominence. Minnesota more so than Indiana. I mean, Indiana's always had good teams, but nobody ever thought of them as perennial championship contenders.
Sure, but like Phoenix and Milwaukee are mid-market teams. They're not,
I wouldn't call Phoenix a mid-market team. I mean, Phoenix is pretty big.
Yeah, but they're not a Charlotte, for example, I would say. Or okay, that's a bad example.
Yeah, they're not a Charlotte. Your example would be they're not a Houston, they're not a Dallas, they're not a Golden State.
Yes.
They're not in LA. And I get it, though I would think in terms of market size, they're probably like right there in the top five. Weirdly enough, I don't know if you know this or not. Do you know this is the first Western Conference final to not feature a team from Texas or California since 1996?
I did read about this. I thought the stat was that this is the first Western Conference Finals to not be played in Texas or.
Well, yeah, that's the same thing, right? It doesn't feature a Texas or a California team.
But I read that stat. I'm like, okay, so the COVID Western Conference Finals didn't happen because those were played in the bubble down in Florida.
But it featured a California team in the Lakers.
That part is true.
So, and that may be part of the reason why this feels weird. And, the other thing is, Minnesota, we have to get a little bit adjusted to because outside of last year, they haven't really been in this spot. I think I look at this Thunder team, and the reason why I think I don't quite wrap my arms around this Thunder team is because their previous great team with Durant, Westbrook, Ibaka, that trio, Kendrick Perkins was even on that squad at times. That was
Don't forget James Harden.
James Harden for a little bit before he got dumped to Houston. I'm talking about their entire run, all the way up to the team that won 3-1 against Golden State in 2016. That team was just so electric and so fast-paced and really fun to watch, where these guys are more of, yes, SGA is your star player, but I would argue he doesn't have the personality of a Durant or even a Westbrook at the time.
And yeah, I would agree with you. He's more like calm and
Yeah,
You,
and they just have
you don't
eight,
really get.
nine ferocious defenders, and their game is more based off defense. Where at least Ann in Minnesota gives you the flash.
Yes, you don't really get, for lack of better phrasing, you don't really get the pomp and circumstance
No,
from
you don't. They're just a really good team, and they've been the best team. And again, as I talked about last week on the show, if Oklahoma City wins this series, which for the record, I do predict they will, I think it goes 7 games. I think just like the Nuggets series, Oklahoma City will win a game 7 back in OKC. If they go on to win this series and if they go on to win the championship, and SGA gets regular season MVP, and I would dare say if they're going to win the championship, he will most likely be NBA Finals MVP. It will be not only one of the most historic team performances in the history of the sport, but it will be one of the best seasons a point guard has ever had.
Yeah. I will
Think
say
about
this.
it. He would average over 30 points a game. I think he averaged 32 for the regular season. He was on a team that I think had like the fifth or sixth, maybe even fourth most wins in the history of the NBA regular season. Not only that, but he could potentially get a regular season finals MVP hardware, which are the only guards in the history of the NBA to win regular season MVP and then go on to win finals MVP in the same season are Steph Curry, Michael Jordan, and believe it or not, Bob Cousy. Kobe Bryant and Allen Iverson both won regular season MVPs and got to the finals, but they didn't win the finals or win finals MVP that year. That is the company that SGA would be in if Oklahoma City wins this championship.
And think about this. OKC is really under the cap, and they have tons of future draft picks.
Yes.
So if they win the championship, I don't think it would be a one-off. Remember how you said after the Nuggets won the championship, you thought they would become a dynasty?
Yes.
Which at the time I thought, I was thinking along the same lines, but obviously that didn't end up coming to fruition. But I'll say this, if OKC wins the championship, I think you're looking at the next modern dynasty.
I have heard that sentiment, and this is where I will push back. Is I think the West is only going to get more difficult, and I think that Oklahoma City got a couple of breaks with the way the bracket fell this time, especially with the fact that they took on a Memphis team that was all beat up by the end of the year in the first round. You know, the Clippers and Nuggets went to war with each other in 7 games. Victor Wembanyama got hurt, so San Antonio didn't make the postseason. Obviously, the Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving thing, that fell apart in Dallas, and now they got Cooper Flag. Houston is only going to get better. So, and I think Giannis could be coming to the Western Conference as well. So I don't think it's a slam dunk at all. As a matter of fact, if Oklahoma City's going to win a championship, I think it has to be this year.
That part I agree with. In terms of the Eastern Conference, these two, the Knicks are the only team of these four that have won a championship, and that was all the way back in like 73.
Yep.
And get this, the last time the Knicks were in the Eastern Conference Finals, who did they play?
Yep.
The Indiana Pacers. Like, I don't know what the word is there. I'm blanking on it, but I think
it's just bizarre. It's ironic, you know. Whatever word you want to use. Now the funny thing is,
plus the fact that, and a lot of people are talking about this, you had that interaction in Madison Square Garden last year with Tyrese Halliburton and Jalen Brunson on Friday Night SmackDown.
That and the fact that Reggie Miller from TNT, former Indiana Pacer, obviously is going to be calling this series as TNT swan song to the NBA. So there's a lot of interesting dynamics to this, and the fact that it was obviously a 7-game playoff series that we argued about for pretty much the whole spring last year. Because I made the argument that I thought the Knicks were the better team, and Indiana took advantage of some injuries. Well, on the Knicks side of it, again, you could say, well, last year, obviously, we didn't have Cat at all. Julius Randle was hurt. We didn't have Mikal Bridges. Josh Hart was hurt. Jalen Brunson had a broken hand. And Indiana didn't make any real additions. We have made 2 key additions to our team, and we also have home court advantage. So I look at that, and I think the Knicks should probably win this series. I don't think it goes 7 games. I think it probably goes 6. Will I be shocked if Indiana comes in there and wins the series? No, I will not. But I do think, a lot like Minnesota, I think the only way the road teams have a chance to win these 2 series, they have to steal one of the 2 games, preferably game 1 on the road.
So, to go back to the West for a second, because you just made that point, I think Minnesota has a great chance of going into Paycom Center in Oklahoma City tonight and winning game 1. And here's why. Because the Thunder just played the Nuggets in game 7 on Sunday. And they only had yesterday off. And now they have to turn around and play game 1 against Minnesota. So I would say the Timberwolves have the slight advantage going into game 1 tonight. Does that mean I think they're
I agree with you, but I'll also throw a caveat in. Minnesota also had the rest advantage in game 1 against Golden State. And that was the only game Golden State was competitive in the series. They had just came off a game 7 win against Houston. I do think that sometimes for young teams, playing every other day and getting into a rhythm helps more than sitting for a week waiting around to see who you're going to play.
That part, I believe it is valid. I did find Aaron Gordon's post-game comments interesting, where he said, I wish there were 2 days in between.
For the record, I'm just going to throw it out there because you brought it up and I didn't bring it up. Aaron Gordon played that game on one leg. What did our guys do this postseason? My toe hurts. I gotta miss 4 games. Aaron Gordon's out there on one leg getting 6 rebounds in the first quarter, and you guys are over there laughing on the bench and key. There, I said my piece.
Yeah, I know. I know. Don't get me started on that. But Aaron Gordon was fantastic throughout these playoffs. But I do think there's some validity to what he said about doing, like, not 3 days or 4 days between games, but if you do 2 days between games, I think you would get a better product, especially if game 6, for example, is in Minnesota and then game 7 is back in Oklahoma City.
There were 2 days rest because game 6 was Thursday, game 7 wasn't until Sunday.
I think he was saying that more as a general comment, more so than specifically about that series.
Yeah, you've heard my argument on this for the past couple of weeks. I do think the NBA needs to shorten first-round playoff series. Go back to, I would have gone to best of 3, but if you want to, go to a best of 5 the way it was back in the 90s. I wouldn't even mind the second round being a best of 5 with the games more spread out, because this second round series has basically come down to who's been more healthy.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. But
right,
I want to
let's get back to the East.
Yeah, let's get back to the East. I was just going to say that. I don't know if this series will determine if both Halliburton and Brunson are truly superstars. We had that discussion last week. But what I do think will determine this series is not Brunson and Halliburton. It's the role players around them. For Indiana, I'm primarily looking at Pascal Siakam. Um, I'm looking at Ben Matherin. I'm looking at Neesmith. I'm looking at Nemhard, and I'm looking at Turner. And then for New York, first and foremost, I'm looking at Cat. I'm also looking at Mikhail Bridges and Mitchell Robinson, the whole crew. But that's where I think this series will be decided is not Halliburton and Brunson because we know they're both generally going to show up. Though I would give the slight edge to Brunson in that
Oh,
regard.
absolutely. I mean, Tyrese Halliburton, I mean, we've already seen him not show up already in one game this series. Game 3 against Cleveland, he had 4 points.
Okay.
So, to your point, though, I disagree with you a little bit because if Indiana does win this series, Tyrese Halliburton is absolutely a superstar. I mean, you cannot be in the NBA Finals, in my opinion, outside of the 2004 Detroit Pistons, which, again, I've said, I think this Indiana team could be that. Potentially a team with no Hall of Famers that went on to beat a great team, whether it would be the Lakers in '04, Oklahoma City, or Minnesota, potentially here in 2025, 21 years later. Um, but I think, Halbert had some good moments in the postseason. Obviously, the game 2 buzzer beater, and he played really well in the second half of game 5. And I will give you this. He may not show up in every playoff game, and it's been my knock on him. But from what I've seen this postseason specifically, in big games, he will show up. And I think one of the most underrated aspects of Indiana that no one's talking about, I agree with you. Neesmith, Benedict Mandarin, Andrew Nemhard, Siakam have to play well. But Miles Turner, to me, has always been one of the most underrated players in the NBA. He had been in trade talks with the Pacers and the Lakers and Phoenix and Dallas and whatever Western Conference team you wanted to throw out there who was looking for a big to boost their championship chances the last few years. Indiana ended up not giving him away after, again, he was rumored for like 3 straight trade deadlines. And to
Wasn't
me,
there at one point where like a deal was in place for him?
for the
I thought
Lakers, right, at one point,
I believe it was for the Lakers that like a deal
was it
was
was
in
it the
place.
year after the bubble, right? I think it was that year where they played Denver in the Western Conference Finals potentially. I don't recall off the top of my head, but he has been so underrated to me. And the Knicks, right? You're going to get your rebounding from the likes of Mitchell Robinson. You know that obviously Josh Hart is going to give you OG Anunoby is going to give you production, but to me, can the Knicks rebound? Because I do think Indiana has a little bit of a size advantage. Can the Knicks rebound enough?
That sounds right. I think it might have actually been Phoenix. But
Makes
either
a leap of
way,
it.
um, I do. The reason I would give Indiana the slight edge is because of the lack of bench production New York gets outside of, the guys who
Well,
Thibodeau
I thought that
uses.
was going to be their doom and gloom against Boston. And again, the Knicks, I can't figure them out. They should have won. You could have made a case they could have lost to Detroit in 6. You could have made a case, regardless when Jason Tatum goes down, they could have been down 3-1 to Boston. And yet here they are, favored to win the East. And by the way, if Minnesota does knock off Oklahoma City and the Knicks do get past Indiana, guess who would have home court in the NBA Finals? The New York Knicks.
Yeah. Wait, say that one more time.
If Minnesota beats Oklahoma City and the Knicks beat Indiana, guess who gets home court in the NBA Finals?
The New York Knicks.
Yeah. Who, by the way, a team that I thought had no chance to beat Boston or Cleveland, and again, barely survived Detroit, go into Boston, beat them down in 6 games, and now they are favored to win this series.
Think about this too. If Indiana beats New York and Minnesota beats Oklahoma City, guess who gets home court advantage? The Indiana Pacers.
Wait, Indiana would get home court over Minnesota? That I did not know. That would be interesting.
Because Indiana's a 4 seed, Minnesota's a 6 seed.
Well, yeah, but I wasn't sure record-wise because I knew the West was a lot deeper than the East.
Let me double check on that. I want to make sure I got that info right. Let me see standings. Indiana was 50-32. Minnesota was
48.
Minnesota was 49-33. So
Okay,
yes,
so by a game, Indiana gets the home court. Yeah.
yeah. Think about that. And I know you're not a big Indy motorsports fan, but on Sunday, May 25th, this weekend, the Indianapolis 500 is happening at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That's the same day as I believe it's Game 4 of the Eastern Conference
Finals.
Finals.
It's Game 3 because they're going every other day. Game 1's tomorrow.
Okay, so that's Game 3 in Indianapolis. So think about this. Like, fans will get to go from the Indy 500, which is one of the biggest races in motorsports, if not the biggest, to Game 3 at Gamebridge Fieldhouse.
What's your prediction for this series? I don't think you officially said.
I'm going to go with, I think this series goes to a Game 7 again, just like it did last year. But because the NBA needs New York in the finals, I'm going to continue this storyline. I'm going to continue to push it. The NBA will show their favoritism in some fashion, and that will allow the Knicks to go to the finals.